Most recently, Russia has refused to meet in the Normandy format, and recent news of Russian troop movements in the border area with Ukraine is extremely troubling. These events show that the ball is in Moscow's court when it comes to resolving existing differences. I am convinced that the EU will continue to speak with one voice.
Let's speak to Ben Aris, who's in Berlin. He's a former Russia correspondent, a Russia expert, now editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews. Ben, you may have seen the snap that came up on one of the agencies about an hour ago, the Defense Ministry in Ukraine saying its air force has carried out practice drills, including airstrikes. What's happening? Some people say that Russia may invade Donbass early next year.
Indeed. What we're seeing is movement of troops. Russia has moved up some very powerful attack battalions to stations that are close to the Ukrainian border. And everyone is getting very upset, very worried about the possibility of an invasion by Russia into Ukraine. However, having said that, if you talk to the Ukrainians themselves, and we talk to Kiev, we have a correspondent there, that on the border itself, exactly next to the border, there's no troops present. They're all in cities along the line facing Ukraine. So this is much more of a threat than an imminent attack. I mean, there's been reports of Russian troops massing on the border, but that's incorrect. What they brought up is a lot of heavy and new army battalions that have been stationed in various cities that face across the Belarusian border, and then further down into Voronezh and into Rostov, which are actually on the Ukrainian border or close to it, several hundred kilometers away, so that they're in a position to move those troops up if they want to, but it's not an imminent threat, it's a potential threat.
What is the state of the fighting in those two separatist regions in the east of Ukraine? Is it still a low-level conflict, and is it non-stop?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to understand that Russia's goal here is to prevent Ukraine from even applying to join NATO. That's its bugbear. I mean, Putin said over and over again that that's what he's worried about, that it's a red line, that Russia will not accept Ukraine joining NATO. And by keeping the fighting in Donbass, this easternmost province of Ukraine, at a low level, a frozen conflict, then NATO rules are such that you cannot join NATO if you have a disputed border, if you have an ongoing conflict. And Russia, I think, is prepared to keep that in perpetuity, that as long as that conflict's going on, Ukraine cannot join NATO, and that's its goal here. And so there's no escalation. Then on the Russian side, what they're afraid of is that Zelensky, the president, that he will attempt to take back the Donbass by force. And Ukrainians have been investing heavily into their military. However, you know, they're facing the Russian army. There's no way they can win that fight. And if they tried to, then that would escalate. You'd end up with, at best, a proxy war, at worst, World War III.
OK, so we got Russia directly involved in eastern Ukraine and along its border with that country. But we've got the Polish government saying that Moscow is the hand that is guiding the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, in creating this migrant crisis. Do you see it as a coincidence, or is it definitely not one for you in terms of these two events can both destabilize NATO and the European Union?
They're both destabilizing. They're both a function of the terrible relationships that have developed between East and West. I don't think they're linked. I think people overestimate the amount of influence that the Kremlin has on Lukashenko. Lukashenko is a bit of a loose cannon. I'm pretty convinced that the Kremlin would like to see him go, in so much as, you know, at the moment, the Russians are focused on getting this new gas pipeline working, Nord Stream 2. And Lukashenko has engineered this migrant crisis, which has caught the headlines and distracted everybody. And they were actually, you know, Putin and Biden met in Geneva in the summer, and they were both talking about trying to calm things down and bring it down to a pragmatic level. But, you know, Putin has backed Lukashenko. He made a choice there. And now the commentators are talking about looking after Lukashenko, and the Belarusian thing is a chore for Russia, because they decided that better to back Lukashenko, who they think they can control, than to let the opposition, who may be West-leaning, who they can't control, take control of Belarus. So unfortunately, we've had several crises come together at the same time: the gas crisis, the migrant crisis, and now we've got a Ukraine military crisis. And these things are all at root a function of the core relationships that exist between East and West.
Ben, real pleasure. Thank you so much indeed. Ben Aris from BNE IntelliNews.